Hi, we are continuing our discussion and reading over changes in ecosystems. I have my Delta reader right here, and I am going to read a little bit to you about topics such as succession and survival and extinction. So some of these things you might have heard about before. All right, so let's go ahead and start reading. Make sure that you are listening. Today we are just listening. There will be no notes today. Succession. Ecosystems are constantly changing. You have read that as an ecosystem changes, some of its species may no longer be able to obtain the resources they need. Those species gradually move away or die. At the same time, other species move in because the changed ecosystem has what they need to thrive. A gradual change in the kinds of organisms living in an ecosystem is called succession. Recall how an abandoned farm field can change into a forest over time. That is an example of succession. Shrubs and trees gradually replace the grasses growing in the field, and the kinds of animals living in the area change as well. Succession can also occur after a sudden event changes the landscape and destroys many of the populations in an ecosystem. For example, Mount St. Helens, a volcano in the state of Washington, so that's in the United States, erupted in 1980. Hot winds, ash, and mudslides killed thousands of plants and animals. Within a year, however, seeds blew into the area and began to grow. Some shrubs that were not buried deeply in the ash survived and sprouted again. Some animals also survived the blast, and others moved into the area as plants began to spread. Okay, so succession is a gradual change in the kinds of organisms living in an ecosystem. Okay, and the examples they gave were the farm, the field, over time turning into a forest, which we read about that previously. And also, when Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, hot winds, ash, and mudslides killed thousands of plants and animals. And within a year, seeds blew into the area and began to grow. Okay, so some shrubs that were not buried deeply in the ash also survived and sprouted again, but more animals and plants and things moved into the area after that had happened. Right, so next is survival and extinction. Some individual organisms have characteristics that give them a better chance of surviving an environmental change. These organisms stay alive and pass their helpful characteristics on to their offspring. Over many generations, their whole species adapts or changes. Consider how a polar bear with thicker fur has a better chance of surviving in extremely cold conditions. In the past, polar bears with thicker fur survived the cold and had offspring. As a result, over many generations, the species changed. Now, all polar bears have thick fur. The thick fur of a polar bear is an example of an adaptation. This is also something that we kind of have briefly talked about before, so let me remind you again what an adaptation is. An adaptation is a special body structure or behavior that helps an organism survive in its environment. Okay, so in the polar bear's case, their thick fur is their adaptation. Okay, so over time, their fur grew thicker to help them survive those cold conditions that they were living in. The root systems of some desert plants are very wide and shallow, which is an adaptation that helps the plants obtain water. Some fish swim in large groups, which is an adaptation that makes it more difficult for bigger fish to catch and eat one of them. Over time, some species die out because they're not able to adapt to changes in their environments. A species is extinct when all its members have died. A species is endangered when it is at risk of becoming extinct because too few of its members are alive. Okay, so extinct means there are no more of them left. They're all gone. And endangered means they're close to becoming extinct. To learn about extinct species and about past changes in the environment, scientists sometimes study fossils. Fossils are the preserved remains or traces of once living things. Scientists compare fossils to one another and to organisms that are still alive today. Okay, so that is the end of the section that we're going to read today. So let's just discuss a few things. First of all, what is succession? Okay, so succession is when an ecosystem changes and different species move away and new species move in. That's what succession is. An example of succession would be farmland changing into a forest, fields changing into shrubs and trees, and then the animals that live there change too. What are the features that help organisms survive? Those are adaptations, and we discussed a few of those with the polar bear's fur, and with the fish swimming in big groups, and we've discussed others as well. Okay, again, what's an example of an adaptation? A polar bear having thick fur to live in cold environments. What is it called when all of a species members are dead? That's called extinction. Okay, an example of an extinct species, I'm not sure if y'all have heard of this species before, but a dodo bird is an extinct bird species that once lived on an island in the Indian Ocean. Okay, so that's a bird that no longer exists. There are none of them left. They're extinct. What is it called when a species is close to becoming extinct? That is called endangered. And when there are a lot of endangered species, you could type in to Google endangered species and you will get a whole list of them. Okay, so those are animals that are close to becoming extinct. What are the preserved remains of once living things? And those are fossils. And scientists use those fossils to study species that are extinct. For example, the dinosaurs. Okay, they use dinosaur fossils to study and learn about what those dinosaurs were like. I'm sure they use fossils of other animals as well. So yeah, that's what fossils are. And that is going to be all for today. Tomorrow, when we are hopefully back in in-person classes, we will take some notes about succession and survival and extinction, so be prepared for that. Today, you are just watching and listening to this video. All right, I'll see you later.